Awesome. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I hope everybody can hear us out there, and want to welcome you to our OCULUS presentation. Expand your business by building a successful dry eye practice. And really pleased to have an esteemed panel with us today. We've got Dr. Wes McCann, Dr. Peter Laansoo, and the most interesting man in optometry, Dr. Pavan Avinashi. We won't go into that too much, Pavan, but hey guys, welcome and thanks for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. There's an opportunity to chat with us and dialogue by asking questions. So if you have a question, and if you have a question to a specific doctor, feel free to say, hey, Wes, I have a question for you, and I'll try to weave that in there. So we want to be able to answer all your questions. We're also going to be recording this and being able to share it to all the attendees and everybody that signed up for this. And we'll hopefully get to all the questions in due time. So what I want to do is, before we get started, is just a little bit of a shout out to a podcast that OCULUS has called May I Interrupt? Please sign up for that podcast and listen to some dry eye gurus out of the US. But we've got the gurus of Canada right now. So I want to go around the table first and let each of our doctors introduce themselves. And it's interesting. All four of us have multiple practices, and I'll just introduce myself first. I'm Trevor Miranda. I practice on Vancouver Island. I have 4 clinics called Couch and Eye Care. We have a center that we sort of draw in for our dry eye clinics, but we do practice, some form of dry eye treatments at all of our clinics. So let's start with Dr. McCann, and we'll go around the table and just introduce yourself and just sort of explain, with multiple practices, how do you generally address dry eye?
So I practice in London, Ontario, West McCann, and I have 5 practices in Southwestern Ontario. With dry eye, really 3 of our practices feed to 1, and we have kind of our dry eye center of excellence there, and really make that our hub. So each doctor of each location is certainly well versed with dry eye and have started that referral pattern, and we're breaking into the aesthetics realm as well with radio frequency and IPL in addition to the dry eye. So it's fun and exciting and new, and been going great so far. So we'll talk more about that in a little while.
Awesome, Wes, thanks very much. And Dr. Laansoo, how about you? We'll go east to west.
Thanks, Trev. Yeah, so actually, I also have multiple practices. We have 5, but we do things a little bit, I guess, a little bit differently. So they're all at different levels of evolution. We've got one from almost a cold start to one that's more than 40 years old. And what we've done is we've tried to switch every center into sort of a center of excellence. So the instrumentation from OCULUS was great for that. So we've got one at each location, and try to make it so that so the equipment is there, so that the big worry was really that we didn't want to create a dry eye specialist. We wanted everybody in our group to be on equal footing for that, and so a little bit different approach. And so we have a kind of an introductory dry eye package, and then some more advanced equipment that we actually shuttle from office to office on a week-by-week rotation.
Great. And we're going to get into a little bit of how you've been using the OCULUS K5 in your clinics, Peter. So thanks for that. And Pavan, how about you, buddy?
Yes, and hello to all our guests from around the globe. I hear it sounds pretty exciting. We have a good attendee base here. Yeah, I've been heavy invested in and committed to dry eye management and practice for at least a dozen years now. We are based in the North Shore in Vancouver. Our primary location here is in North Vancouver. With all my associates that work with me, essentially they do, as opposed to Peter, they do feed into my practice. I'm the dry eye doctor within our practice. So we are also into facial aesthetics. We do RF. We have done 2 FDA studies in the last year and a half. We've worked on a white paper with different technologies, but we found the OCULUS an imperative platform or diagnostic tool for those studies and for our practice as well. So happy to get into this as we progress.
Yeah, I see you've been doing a lot of aesthetics on yourself. That's been working fantastic.
Like, right?
Look at you. I can't believe you're 65. Anyway, thanks for that, Pavan. What kind of screening, fellas, do you use in your clinic? I know you all practice as primary eye care practitioners as well. What would you use to sort of feed your dry eye clinic? And I think, that's one of the pieces that's really important, is to sort of, use your own patient base to get, referrals into your clinic. So let's start with you, Pavan. How do you do that?
Well, if I go back to how it worked 13 years ago, when they'd come in, we would never ask about dry eye. We would just, if they mentioned it or we saw something really scathing on the corneal tissue, we'd give them a sample of artificial tears. Fast forward now where we are, it's all about asking the patients. If we're not asking patients if they're having issues or they have any symptoms or signs, very often they're not bringing it up. And we know the prevalence exists in our own patient base. Like you said, we don't have to market beyond our own patient or our client base, but we have it all here. I think it's about just asking that question. As an associate or as a doctor, just start asking, do you have symptoms? In our practice, we have empowered our staff to get involved in this initially, and now we do the OSDI screener. Actually, we do the DEQ5 screener in our exams. And then when we admit them to our dry eye practice, that's when we get into the OSDI, and that's when we do the myography and the OCULUS stuff.
Awesome. Wes and Peter, do you also utilize a validated screening test for your primary care?
We're very similar. We also use the DEQ5, and we've now integrated it to our online forms. So we do all our intake forms, patient update forms online. So we've integrated the DEQ5 into that. So we get that score from every patient that's coming back to our office. So it is great because it really helps you to uncover a lot of patients that you wouldn't have asked those questions to before. And what we're finding is younger and younger patients are having really valid mild to moderate dry eye scores that we would never have considered asking those questions to before. So especially post-COVID, or during COVID rather, we were open for urgent care. And I would say 50 to 60% of our urgent care telehealth calls were dry eye. So we referred them back to our dry eye practice post-COVID. But it is amazing how much you do uncover with that. And then once we do enter them into our dry eye clinic, then they go through the OSDI, very similar, and the OCULUS and a number of other diagnostics.
Great. And Peter, how about you? Anything different?
Yeah, well, a little bit. Okay, so very similar. We do use a questionnaire, but actually, I was heavily influenced by one of your speakers at the Dry Eye Summit last year. It was Ewan McGinty. Anyway, so he did a presentation at one of the Dry Eye Summits, that really resonated with me, and he said that when you're doing just regular optometry, you'll notice dry eye, but so often that you're so concerned with just doing the glasses, the contact lenses, the chief complaints, that you sort of put it aside. It's not the chief thing. And his recommendation was which I call the I have a concern technique. So you get to the end and you give the synopsis, and then you talk about some symptom of dry eye or some sign of dry eye that you saw. And in our clinics, then we try to then get those patients into a completely different stream of eye exam, into our dry eye stream. Mm-hmm. And then we only do the questionnaires and that sort of thing then.
Yeah, I like what, thanks, Peter. I like what Wes said about the internet forms. I think everybody, should be jumping on that. We use something called Intake Queue at Couch and Eye Care, and it's really neat to have a lot of these answers ready for you. And some of these questionnaires are pretty smart. It's like if you get this score, it could offer you, a more advanced dry eye assessment automatically, or vision therapy, or what have you. So there's lots of interesting things that you can peel off from that. So please, I think this is one of the interesting things of this pandemic. It's the technologies brought us forward, actually. So I think if we look at the silver lining, we can take that from it. Speaking of COVID, guys, are you docs doing anything differently in terms of treatment? Let's just assume we're all doing PPE, but are you omitting anything that you otherwise would normally do? And I know, here in Vancouver Island, we're literally on an island, and we just don't want anybody else to come, because it seems like we don't have any COVID here, or it's very, very low, that people are very calm. And I know we started a little bit earlier than our colleagues in Ontario West, but maybe let's start with you, Wes. What are you doing differently because of COVID?
So post-COVID, we haven't done nearly as much BluffX and ILUX as we did before. We have been moving the patients more to IPL, and now that summer's coming along, RF as well, instead of the IPL with sun exposure. So we've kind of been moving patients a little bit away of the BluffX and ILUX, just due to the amount of time they have to spend in front of that patient, pretty close, and the nature of what the BluffX does as well. So we've kind of avoided that a little bit, but we also don't have a lot of cases in London, where our dry eye clinic is, where most of our patients do come from. So I think we're down to around 2 a day for the most part of new cases. So our staff are certainly much less concerned than they were before. It's still top of mind, obviously, but that panic isn't there as much. But with fully outfitted and PPE, face shields, et cetera, when we're doing more advanced procedures. But patients have been very receptive regardless. And we've actually found we did have a big influx of dry eye patients post-COVID because of all the electronic use that everybody was doing and utilizing during COVID. I found my eyes was really bad and really dry during COVID, just with all the screen work that I was doing. I'm not used to sitting in front of a computer all day.
Yeah, awesome. Good answer. And Peter, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's pretty much it's very similar. So we never fully stopped. We went to urgent care in March, and so the first step in that, of course, is like everybody, I'm sure it's doing across country, is spacing out the clinics, and we spaced out our exams as well. And we're just recently getting back to the densities. We used to do a standard 20-minute exam, and we've gone. We went to 30 for a while, 40 for some difficult cases, and we're getting back to it. And it's more of a, we haven't really dropped anything. We just added the extra time. I spend an awful lot of time talking patients into wearing masks and not doing this sort of thing, like a cigarette hole. So this is one that we sneezed.
Yeah. There's a lot. I saw that. All the different ways to mess up wearing your mask, the feed bag, the blindfold, all really interesting. I thought you were going to reach in your cabinet for some scotch, but we'll transition to Pavan for that. Pavan, I wanted to ask you a little bit of a different question. Craig has submitted this question. If you get a significant score on the DEQ5 during your primary eye exam, do you run any additional tests, or do you sort of refer it to a standalone dry eye assessment, a separate visit?
That's a great question, and I think it depends on your type of practice. If you're a single doctor practice that may be still growing and has the capacity to do extra auxiliary testing at the tail, you want to make things convenient for a patient. But for us, being a busy practice like many of the doctors on my panel, all the doctors on the panel, for us we allocate this as a separate issue. We go through the exam, we talk to them, saying that we're going to admit them into our dry eye clinic, or my associates referring into my practice as dry eye practice, and we get them to come in for a separate visit altogether. Just like we do for glaucoma. If we see suspicious pressures or we see concerns of the optic nerve, we don't necessarily always run a visual field and OCP right away. We tend to bring them back, explaining that, hey, you know what, we need to allocate a certain amount of staff resources and time to do this properly. And that's why we'll get you back on X the next day. And so we do the same thing with our dry eye practice. We do get patients to come back. So if they're screened through the DEQ5 or even just a routine exam, and we see some symptoms or concerns that is brought up for the discussion with the doctor, we'll always admit them back to a separate appointment.
So I have a question for the three of you then. I get this question a lot as well, is when you do identify that patient that has clear 3+ or toothpaste-like consistency MGD, do you route them through a dry eye assessment first, knowing that you're going to have to end up with ILUX, LipiFlow, IPL, or RF? Or do you bypass that but do some diagnostic testing, such as a qualified score test like an OSDI plus your OCULUS, so that you can image and you can do your myopography, or a couple things to start, and then bypass your full workup when you know what likely is the cause?
Great question. We'll probably hand that to Pavan. It's funny. It's like when you get an Optimap and you know it's a retinal detachment, do you even look in, right?
Yeah.
But let's pass that to Pavan. How would you answer that?
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think for us, it's important to provide baselines to see what we're improving of. Whatever platform we're using as a therapeutic, we want to see where we're moving on the OSDI. We want to see how they're improving on molarity, MMP9. You know, that's why I think it's imperative to still do those. And plus, for me, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in this discussion, the biggest importance to having myopography or a device like the Oculus is to show the patient. Not just tell them, hey, by the way, you got really bad oil glands, your tear breakup time is such and such. It means nothing to them. When we can show them what their myopography and their oil glands are looking at that certain state, being able to transition them to a therapeutic device, be it ILUX or RF or IPL or LipiFlow, and put a price tag to that, it's easier sell, let's talk it. And I think it's important for us to show that to them. So absolutely, bring them back, do what you need to do. You know where you're going to go, which direction you go to, but it just makes it easier to communicate and sell to the patient.
And I'll echo that. So that's actually a problem that we have with our group. So with 17 associate doctors, everybody's an independent, and everybody will do things a different way. But it's a really strong mandate of ours to make sure that we put the patients through that sort of imaging, and we got some sort of actual facts. And of course, we've been doing this a long time too. So everybody's been treating dry eye long before we had all this good imaging. And that's really been the focus in the last couple of years is getting through to an actual separate dry eye exam. And I spend a lot of my day, explaining, like, I've had dry eye for years. I know, I just use these tears in a bottle, and it's like, well, no, there's actually 3 major different streams of dry eye, and they've got completely different treatments, and you got to figure out which one.
That's great, Peter. I thought I'll stay with you here and maybe have you walk through how you utilize the Oculus K5 in your clinic. I mean, I think that is part of how you move them from a diagnostic to, just a second, I've got a screen share here. If I can find okay, there we are.
It was showing up.
Was it showing up?
Oh yeah, yep.
Okay, good, thanks. Okay, do you see that?
Yeah, it's not in presentation mode though.
Sorry, is that in presentation mode?
There we go. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah. I have to go through here. So all I did here, just to explain to everybody watching, is we got some questions in advance, and a lot of them were about crystal reports. It's one of the great features of the Oculus equipment in particular. So I thought I'd show how we set up a report. So the nice thing about crystal reports is you can set them up in any kind of custom way, but this is ours. So this was from a presentation I did to our associate doctors, and the first bit of it was that to try to get that point across, that we used to do dry eye very piecemeal. So there'd be some new advancement like a BlephX or punctal plugs, and then we just get excited about that, and then we try to talk into that. We had a separate fee for it. So one of our big things that we did was we switched to this style. So it's the idea was the idea was to start with something more introductory. So we call it initial dry eye assessment idea, and we put a price very similar to our routine eye exam. And then advanced eye management was much higher, and so the point was to try to baby step patients through there, and also give ourselves some discipline, so that we weren't skipping right to just the latest equipment. You can skip to the next slide. So we do start like we've been talking about it here already. So right now we're actually using the speed quiz just because it's a little bit faster to get through. So we have this right on our web page, and so the first thing we use the I have a concern technique to talk about something that they said during the exam, and then we book in the next dry eye assessment, and then we direct them online to do that test. Then when they come in, they go through a completely different pretest. They don't see the doctor at all, but they go through the Oculus is a big part of it with all its imaging, and then we've recently added in tear osmolarity as well, and so a little bit of a video of the eyelashes. We're getting an awful lot of Demodex, but this is the sort of overall report, and so we start off with that, and then you can go to the next slide there, Trevor. And so you usually go through this. So this is the way I prefer to do it. So I talk about the tear prism first, and those little reticules at the bottom. I just have a little or sort of a ritual where I actually measure them right in front of the patient, and then what I like about it is it grades it right there, and the patient can see if it's normal, mild, moderate, or severe. Next slide. So next, it comes up with a really nice non-invasive tear breakup time, which doesn't look all that dramatic on the picture, but the part at the top where it's got the nice red scale usually gets a lot of attention, and so it starts to localize where the problem is. And often when I get to this part, the patients they're starting to play along. It's like, yes, I do feel it, and it does feel like it's coming from that side of my eye.
Mm-hmm. This is a neat one. This Nick Butt, the non-invasive tear breakup time, I find, so it's cool.
Yeah.
Carry on.
The interferometry fits in nicely after that, so it doesn't show up here, but it's actually a short looped video. So it shows a blink, and then it'll show the tear film, and then you're seeing the color pattern, and it asks you to grade it with colorful or limited reds and blues. And so this gives a nice segue to talk about that the tear film is actually a big part of it is the oils, and this is where we're visualizing the oils, and that the previous slide where it showed that there was an area under damage is often because of an oil deficiency problem, which fits in really nicely to the next one. And this is really we call this the money shot, really. So this is the one that most patients have never seen before. So of course it's the meibography. So you're seeing the actual meibomian glands there. And what I really love about Oculus's equipment compared to some of the competitors is this next bit here, where once you've shown the eyelids, and then you actually slide the patient's picture to the grading scale on the bottom, and patients love this part. So they're really into it by this part. So there's no damage at all, but very often you'll find those great 2s and 1s, which fits in very nicely into sort of the summary. And so it comes back to that. There's some others that we have. Every doctor has a slightly different report depending on how they like to go through it. So there's the redness scan. There's also you can put your fluorescein right on there. But it does come up with this sort of report. We use this a little bit. We've gone to our own printed form that we then check off with what we found. And so very often in our initial assessment, we'll do some of the treatments right there. So my favorite is Demodex. Demodex is fun just to treat right there. But the real thing is some of the advanced treatments coming down. So for us, it's LipiFlow and radio frequency. We were really worried about trying to skip steps and talk patients right into this more expensive treatment, especially because that tends to be your really severe dry eyes that get into that. And so we've only been doing this for about a year, but breaking it out this way, we found that from the 144 to the much more expensive, ours is almost $700 right now. there's between 10 and 12% of patients are actually making that transition and doing it happily.
Good. Well, thanks, Peter. Let me just.
I also just further echo Peter just in terms of we use a very similar flow to what you do there in our dry eye assessment. We add in osmolarity, as you mentioned, MMP9. We do sodium fluorescein staining on there and lissamine green. So we do kind of the whole gamut. But the beauty about this device is that everything up to everything you mentioned there and that I mentioned as well, the techs do. So there's the entire dry eye workup is done by your tech, and you are able to then quickly evaluate the gland. You do like a 20-second slit lamp exam, and then you get the opportunity to counsel for the rest of the time. So you get to spend much more time with the patient, really evaluating and showing them the pictures. And like you said, they're blown away when they see this. When you pull up that screen, your slide 11 there with all of those different views of the eye with different tests you've done, the patients are really blown away because they don't know what's going on when they're behind the cartograph. And then you show them all the images and documentation, and they're very impressed. And the thing that I really like about the cartograph and just the dry eye workup is you got to equate it to something else we do. So think about glaucoma. You want to get your subjective, objective, and measurables. So your subjective scores are your OSDI or your speed or your whatever your testing that you're doing in terms of qualitative scores, surveys, and then you get your objective. So that's everything you're seeing on the cartograph, and then you get your measurables, which are your MMP9s and your osmolarity. So patients care about the numbers in terms, just like they do what's my pressure with glaucoma, and you care so much about the other scores in addition to that, and you manage it all together. So I can't imagine now practicing dry eye and managing dry eye without the cartograph, without the OCULUS, because it just gives you so much data to manage your patients along the way and watch for improvement and show them improvement, and they get to participate in that.
It's similar to OCT,
Great.
isn't it?
What's that?
It's a similar feeling to when we got our OCT. It's like I'm getting the same way. It's tough to practice without it.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things like that nowadays. Pavan, do you have a la carte program, or do you have a program fee like Peter does? And I believe Wes does as well, has a program, includes so many visits. Can you just describe your program for us?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. We initially did the a la carte again years ago when we were kind of figuring things out and creating a program. But now we do charge a one-time dry assessment consult for $150. I have to share that, which is not too far off what Peter is charging, which includes when we do all the workup, including my biography, all of the other OCULUS workup, MMP9. We do osmolarity testing as well. So yeah, we do have that as a separate fee. And I'm fully agreeing with Wes that I think we as ODs underutilize our staff or undertrain our staff to get involved in this, empower them. Many of them are excited to kind of have this, take this hat and get, take this role and move with it. And most of our dry workup and management and treatments are actually done with our technicians now.
Great, and you do run primary eye care as well in tandem when you're treating dry eye. Pavan, let's let you address that. Sounds like you do. I do.
Yeah, I don't have half a day allocated. Like I don't book off a Friday morning and just do dry eye because just versatility and where we're at. We're all busy with different practices and different things like that. So no, we know ahead of time when they're coming in. Of course, they're booked accordingly. But no, we build a primary care schedule along with our dry eye practice.
Great. And I think that's the secret sauce. That's why you guys, all you doctors, are so successful, that you're able to monetize dry eye in a way that you don't give up, selling glasses and contact lenses. So we're not giving up that space, but we're still taking advantage and creating another business segment. And I think that's a really key pearl that everybody that wants to do dry eye should understand. It's not you, the doctor, it's your clinic. And I like what Peter's done here is really formulate a plan that all his associates and team can get behind as well. So that's great. And all these doctors are utilizing screening techniques that all their clinicians can take advantage of. You can deep dive as these doctors have done, but I think you want to start somewhere as well. So great feedback, guys. All of you retail dry eye products in your clinic, is that true? Yeah,
absolutely.
And, as that's evolved over time, I imagine. Wes, maybe you can speak to that. Did you just sort of start slow there, or are you like a pharmacy and carry everything?
So we certainly did start slow at the beginning. We started with some preservative-free artificial tears, et cetera, as we were just getting our feet wet. And then Brooder Mask is a very easy addition and easy sell. Then we got into omega-3s and obviously all the lid wipes. And we're expanding even more now with what we're carrying in terms of consumables, because we're breaking into the aesthetics market as well. So now we're carrying skincare products and sunscreen and different things like that, which just adds to our consumable product as well. But it really is amazing how much that adds value to your practice, because I think you oftentimes underestimate the number of patients that are going to buy OTC products from you. And if you are retailing good quality products that you're recommending, patients come back for them as well. So we have patients that come back just for artificial tears and just for omega-3s month after month, because they find value in them and they like the product. And we've added them to our web store now, so we can direct ship them to their house. So there's so much value in that. I can't underestimate it enough, or can't emphasize enough that you really need to start carrying products like that and recommend them to your patients. Walk out to the front with them, grab the product. This is what I'm recommending and why, and put it on the front desk with them. And again, your patients do trust you, and they're looking to you for advice and looking to you for the answers. So you're the expert, and certainly recommend what you think is best for them.
That's great. Pavan, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, doctors, 2 rules. Number 1, please stop sampling drops. Stop sampling artificial tears. If you're still doing that, that's probably the first thing you need to do if you're ever planning to do dry eye. Number 2, recommend what you sell what you recommend. As Wes alluded to, there are so many awesome products on the market nowadays. Do your research. I mean, I'm not going to say one's better than the other. Do your research, find out what you like using and why. There's so much product on the market that are exclusive to optometry nowadays that are premium products. We're not just supporting that line, that product, because it's only available to us. It is actually premium products. I think if you dive in and research why it is, you'll be satisfied. And more importantly, anecdotally, your patients are more ecstatic by the end result of what they're doing. I'm a huge advocate, as many of these panelists, on preservative-free options for our dry eye patients. I'm not saying that drops with preservatives are bad. I prefer to go for the premium products, the stuff that have less chemicals in it. And that's saying that others are safe. I like exclusivity. I really think it's important to educate staff on all your products that you carry. I don't care if you have 2 products or you have 40 products. Just make sure all your staff can talk about every difference about every single one of them, and have it showcased. In our clinic, we don't have it behind the desk. We don't have it inaccessible. We have a whole wellness center where it's like you're walking into Sephora. It's nicely lit, well displayed. Everything is there, all labeled, so people come in can help themselves. So we do, I mean, I'm sure no different than you, we do close to $20,000 a year in dry eye products alone, and it's a self-sufficient profit center. You don't have to have fancy diagnostics. You don't have to have fancy therapeutic devices to actually make dry eye profitable. Charge for your time. We as doctors never do, especially optometry. We need to do better at that. Number 2, realize that there is a profitability in creating and selling retail products.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, guys. One thing, all my 4 clinics are cold starts, as you know, and we've grown into 6 figures in revenue of these drops and dry eye products, and so it becomes an important thing. And I would think track that piece as well. So you should be tracking your dry eye business, and understanding and trying to grow and target that specifically as part of your big business. So. And that would apply to all your streams, whether it's sunglasses and contact lenses or vision therapy, low vision. Track those, have goals and budgets associated with that if you really want to dig into the business, which is what we're talking about today. So those are great points. Wes, did you have something to add to that?
Well, just to echo Pavan's point about charge what you're worth and don't be afraid to set your fees and don't do it for free, because when you're setting your fees and evaluating what you're going to charge, you really have to consider in dry eye and in assessments there are consumable costs. So your MMP9 and your osmolarity have consumable costs associated with those. So know what your chair time cost is just to run the chair for the time that patient's going to be in it. So on average runs $80 to $100 for a chair time for that space, and then know what your consumable costs are and make sure that you're giving yourself some margin in that for your own time. So set your appropriate fees and value the services you're providing for sure.
Yeah, and if you're in Ontario, don't see seniors or kids right now. Thanks. Hey, it's tough. It's tough. We're in a really interesting, good market out here in the West, but absolutely value your time. That is great advice. Thanks, guys. I wanted to just pivot to a couple of the questions that we're having. Thanks everybody for putting up questions. We're going to get to them. Do you guys grade in front of the patients? I have a chairside assistant. I just yell out stuff. I'm like, this guy's got Demodex, Bleph, and grade 2 keratitis, and my chairside writes. What about you fellas? Pavan?
Yeah, I don't have a chairside text yet. I know Trevor's been trying to push me to do this for a long time. I'll listen to you, buddy, one of these days. But no, do I grade in front of the patient? Absolutely. Is that what the question is? Do I pull up the images of their meibum glands and grade it and show a comparison like Peter does on a scale? 100%. I think that's imperative that we do that. Just like we've constantly referred to as we do with glaucoma, this is a normal optic nerve. This is an abnormal optic nerve, and this is what we're concerned about. We need to do that comparison for patients to understand. That convincing, that seeing, that showing and explaining is what increases compliancy. It's what drives, your 10 to 12% from the, just doing diagnostics to getting involved with all the therapeutic platforms that we have to explain, we have to educate, and yes, we have to tell them the grade for sure.
That's awesome. Great. Peter, I'm just going to ask you, what omega-3s do you recommend? Do you like omega-3s? We have a question from Marina on that.
Well, I'm not personally that big on omega-3s, but there are a lot of our doctors that are. So we do carry them. I'm not sure which exact brands we carry. I'm still kind of caught up in that study from a couple of years ago, where it was a bit of a that placebo effect study.
The dream study.
Yeah, was it?
Yeah,
it was called the dream study. I don't know.
Right.
Isn't that what your treatment protocol is called as well? Yeah.
Yeah. That's
it's perfect. No omegas in your program.
Yeah, but
you still retail omega-3s, right, Peter? You retail omega-3s still, correct?
We do retail omega-3s. I know we have them in right now. It's I know it's one of the mint flavored ones, but it's something I do a lot personally.
Yeah, well, speaking of flavors, out here on the West Coast, Pavan, there's a lot of vegans, and we just got in sort of a vegan formula from Nutri-C. So I think there's a lot of great omega-3 products out there. And again, I would echo Dr. Avinashi's comments that, align yourself with companies that are aligning with you. Align yourself with products that they can get from you at a fair price, at a fair value, but you can make a fair margin there too, because that's important. Because, and don't undervalue, getting everything in one place, especially in the pandemic. That one-stop shopping, the ability to sort of phone us and just pick it up, or we can run it out to your car, I think is highly valued. So consider that when you're picking which products you go with. As Wes says, he started slow, but then he's aligned himself with brands that he's comfortable with and that he's going to recommend, and he can stand behind them, and the manufacturers are standing behind them too. Yes, Bob.
Trev, I want to touch on something. Dr. McCann mentioned something about this too, since we're dealing on last name basis now. And I never had an e-commerce platform until COVID hit. 2 weeks in, we had a full site up. We actually did very well with our e-commerce site, full of a lot of contact lenses and dry products. Now, like many, because I've talked to many practices that still have maintained their e-commerce platform, now the contact lens sales are starting to diminish quite a bit. People are calling in or coming in for that. But our dry eye retail products is still selling very, very well online. People like the ship to, like the convenience, because that has to be refilled more often than contact lenses. They're buying their non-preserved artificial tears or Brooder masks or whatever it may be very regularly. So it's been a great addition to our profit center, our practice too, and convenience factor too.
And depending on which company you're aligning with, some of them will direct ship to your patients for you at no charge. And other ones, if they don't, you can also look at a local shipping group other than Canada Post or UPS or anything like that, or FedEx, because we have a local one that will deliver anywhere within the city for $7. So look for those options, the local delivery courier places, because you can sometimes utilize your web store and only pay $7 for shipping if you can. So it has been a great option for us as well.
You can get your drops and dinner at the same time.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wes, I wanted to stay with you here in terms of marketing. How are you marketing your dry eye clinic? I'm sure you're doing it in many ways, but want to give us a couple of pearls there for us, please?
Sure. And we utilize 4 ECPs for our website, and they do a lot of our marketing. We do have a TV in our waiting room. It's on a loop and plays different videos, which also includes dry eye material and products. Social media, we're starting to push more, and we're gearing our downtown practice more to a dry eye medical social media. So we're just starting to make that shift as well. But a lot of the companies will offer you brochures that you can utilize and certainly have in your clinics. We don't utilize brochures post-COVID as much as we used to, but on our website, we try to redirect a lot of our patients too, because we do have a lot of information on there. But we're also trying to do internal marketing just with our own patients and giving them information before they leave with regards to dry eye. But again, I mentioned we're building out the aesthetic as well. So it's amazing the patients that you speak to about dry eye, and they're somewhat bought in, and then you speak to them the benefits of the aesthetics that are the side effect of the dry eye, and they're bought in 100%, so 110%, and they want to be booked tomorrow. So that has really started to push our dry eye practice as well, and convert that from your 10 to 12% to closer to your 20%, because they see the benefits of the aesthetics as well. So we've built into that eye reward. So anybody that comes in for their annual exam gets a $100 eye reward towards an aesthetics package down the road. So that's starting to drive more of our dry eye in combination with aesthetics as well.
Great. That's a great tip. I just want to go around the table here, actually, because I think this is so important. Do you have a little pearl about marketing, Peter?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you were saying, Wes. Yeah, and I echo the same. The pearl would be if you do dry eye, do it as a at least a separate page, a separate part of your web marketing, something that searches directly. It's just so much easier. If you try to put everything onto one web page, it'll just like a dog's breakfast. But if you concentrate on dry eye, and then in your landing page, just steers towards there. We're finding more and more of our searches are landing right onto dry eye right now, and so that'll be the pearl. Is like you can see on some of our slides. So we call it the dry eye clinic at Capital Vision Care. So it's like a separate part of the clinic.
That's great. Awesome tip, Pavan.
I won't say much different, Dr. McCann, Dr. Laansoo, but I will say this: if we dumb it down or go to grassroots, let's say the best marketing you can do in any practice that's looking to do dry eye is to commit to a dry eye practice. It's easy to say all of us diagnose, all of us talk about dry eye to our patients, but if we actually formalize the fact that we have a dry eye clinic, we are doing this, we have a staff empowered that's involved with that. We actually market even internally, whether it's outside of internal or external doesn't make a difference, but just say, I'm going to admit you to my dry eye clinic. We have a dry eye clinic. We do this in our dry eye clinic. Start having that verbiage and that jargon in your practice. That in itself will change the mindset of not only your team, but also the focus what you're directing towards your patients, whether it's in form of emails or in office screens. And I think it's a great opportunity or a great way to start building your dry eye practice.
You have such great sayings and thoughts. Can listen to you all day. That's good.
I've been up all night, buddy, planning this.
We've been thinking about these. This is fantastic. I want to just add one thing here, guys. That sometimes I would say my happiest patients, and this is year 25 for me. My happiest patients are my dry eye patients, and they want to tell people. So they're great opportunity for testimonials. We've been doing some Facebook Live, which is really kind of make it interesting and funny, and we don't know what we're going to say, so it almost kind of like this webinar here, but it just makes it a little bit more sincere, I guess, authentic, and I think that's an interesting way to play it as well. So use your really happy patients so that they can really spread the word. I think is a great opportunity. But I think the bottom line here, and these all four of us would advocate budgeting towards marketing. So it just doesn't happen by itself. You have to get out there. You have to make sure patients know that you offer these services in dry eye, and that they're that knowledge is there. And exactly like you said, Pavan, making your clinic a dry eye location, a destination. So that's awesome.
And Dr. Miranda, to add to what you're saying, is that it's not only, sometimes it's the unhappy patients that are just chronically sufferers. They're sometimes the biggest advocate of your practice as well. They may come in and complain all day long, and they may pay the fees and do everything else, but they're the ones sending in patients saying, my doctor is committed to dry eye. He has this, he does this, he does this. And at the end of the day, at the end of the day, it's how you're differentiated, because you've created something. You've created a novel experience, but also invested into building something that's something different than any other practice.
Are you always saying it's a she? No, don't answer that. Okay, so so it leads into one of the questions Oculus gets a lot is, what about that patient that signed up for everything? Sometimes they're like, wow, I want LipiFlow, I want IPL, RF. I mean, give me Xiidra and Restasis at the same time. I mean, give it to me all. And we're like, wow. But they're still not happy. How do you address that? Let's go with Pavan on this one, and you guys can chime in.
I think it's extremely important for us to establish expectations from the beginning. Whether it's putting somebody in a multifocal or a multifocal toric contact lens now, which is advanced, or in their first progressive, or admitting them to a dry clinic, explaining, hey, listen, we're dealing with a chronic condition that only progresses with an underlying tone of inflammation. We're going to do our best to slow down that progression. We're not trying to treat or fix anything. We're trying our best to slow down that progression. Now, these are the tools that we have in our practice. This is our success rate. I can't promise anything, but we've had a great success rate, and this is what we hope to give you. By the way, you're going to walk out of here with younger and fresher looking skin on your face too, right, Wes?
Yeah, and that's, I would say, also all the more important to make sure that you are taking those measurements and you're getting objective measurements, because that patient may not remember what they were like at the start. And so when you can say, hey, you know what, you seem unhappy now, but look at this was your subjective score when you started, and this is your subjective score now, and this was your osmolarity when you started, and this is what it is now. Like, you've come a long way. Yes, it's not perfect, but you were like a 10 out of 10 in pain before, and now you're a 4 out of 10 in pain now. So we've certainly made drastic improvement.
Yeah, that's where that survey is so important, right? Peter, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking that my biography has been an absolute game changer for that. So I'm like you, Trevor. I've been practicing over 20 years, not quite 25, but getting there. And it used to be such a frustrating thing. So dry eye's been there forever, and it was just these tears aren't working, and the plugs. I came out of school doing a lot of plugs. Now with my biography, you can show that, and it gives some closure, and you can have that discussion, which you sometimes need to have it. Sometimes it just comes down to, like, I'm sorry, but this is what you have to work with. And combined with that, the techniques that we're using now didn't exist 5-7 years ago, and so go another 5-7 years into the future, and there'll be other things. So there's always some hope. But I find it gets patients off the treadmill. That my biography in particular is excellent for that.
And you know what, for me, one thing, Trev, to add to that, and this is my opinion, and I can respect everybody's might be different, but you know, I think OCT now is pretty much becoming standard of care in diagnostics in a lot of practice if they're planning to do any type of medical optometry. I fully believe mammography should be standard of care too. And maybe we're shifting there slowly, but I think we need to be there with the prevalence of dry in our patient base. I think we need to be starting to have that conversation and having those tools. And there's a lot of devices on the market. And in my opinion, I do feel the Oculus is the gold standard when it comes to mammography and with the added additional tools to it. But I think this is something we all need to look into moving into in the future.
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to add a couple things. You know, dry eye disease is a chronic disease. So, you know, we're not going to necessarily cure you. We're going to manage it, and we're trying to improve your symptoms and your quality of life. So I think that's important. Also, there's a psychological component often if you've been suffering for a long time, and sometimes it's just a, you know, straight on psychological component to it. And, you know, that empathy of you being a doctor and trying to manage them and throw the kitchen sink at their issue can be helpful, but you got to set those reasonable expectations. So thanks, docs. Those were really good points there. Yeah, so I wanted to pivot into a really interesting and exciting area. I think that we're all, four of us in our clinics are getting into is the aesthetics field. And maybe we can just go around the table and give our thoughts on that. I think this is such an emerging, burgeoning area of interest and exciting for optometry to be sort of at the forefront of making you know, feel better and maybe even look better. I don't know, but let's start with Wes, and we'll go around the table here on this.
Sure. So this has certainly been a really exciting, something new type of field. We hired on a medical esthetician, so she is doing all the main aesthetics work, with the exception of when you get the aesthetic side effect from the dry eye treatments you're doing. But we're offering a full aesthetics-based package to our patients. So RF, IPL, certainly are our mainstays, and then we're doing SkinCeuticals. We've brought on as a product for skincare, and they have a sunscreen line. So medical grade, really good quality product. So again, it's amazing having those conversations with patients, because some of the most common questions I get from patients are, how do I get rid of these bags under my eyes? Or I wish you could do something about this. And now I can say, well, you know what, I can. Let's look at some of these options. Let's book you for a virtual consult. So we've started to implement it where we're booking a virtual consult with our medical esthetician. We don't get too much into detail on what the procedure is, et cetera. We're not going to take our exam time for that, but we book a consult with the medical esthetician, and they're far more qualified at closing the deal on that than we would be. So they know the lingo, they know what they can do. Ours has been in the industry for 20 years, working at a dermatology clinic. So again, they speak the lingo very well to the patient, and the buy-in from patients has been pretty phenomenal. So again, doing something as well that you can combine with marketing within your own exam. So hey, you know what, here's $100 towards a package. I'll book you a dry eye aesthetics consult, or an aesthetics consult via Zoom, and they have a presentation they go through. And it's a really neat way of building your practice. And those are all repeat patients too, or repeat customers, patients too, because they have to do their ongoing treatment to maintain. So just like dentistry does teeth whitening for the aesthetics component, and like other physicians are doing Botox. This is a nice non-invasive way of giving facial aesthetics.
And are you running a separate business to sort of work around college rules, or how are you addressing that, Wes?
Yeah, so in Ontario, I spoke with a college. They said it doesn't have to be a separate business. You can do it within the same corporation. They would just like to see us not performing the aesthetics ourselves. So as long as we're not performing the aesthetics, we're able to perform the dry eye procedure if the condition that we're treating is dry eye. But once you break past that and you're doing the aesthetics, they'd like a qualified person to do that on the side. So that's why we hired our medical esthetician. But no, it doesn't have to be a separate business altogether. They said you're doing it in the same building, doesn't matter to us, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't have to be in a separate building either. So that's worked really nicely and been able to be a nice add-on for sure that way.
Great. Peter, your thoughts on aesthetic?
Well, actually, yeah, we don't do as much of that as you might imagine. Actually, we dabbled in that a little bit with radio frequency. It was from the Oklahoma course, and then I think that's originally where that came from. So a little bit of wrinkle removal from heating underneath the skin, and so definitely there's a bit of that effect, and we don't not mention it. But our hopes recently have been in actually about cross referrals. So there's a number of dedicated Medi spas in Edmonton, and so sometimes we get into that route, and they've just got more tools. So to be honest, we're steering those patients towards there. And in return, we are getting some of the some of the pure dry eyes and some of the pure eye problems. But we dabbled with it a bit. It just didn't really get heavily into it. I found personally I wasn't able to treat it as deeply as I would have liked. Got a little bit of the wrinkles around the eyes, but we have a marketing fellow that's heavily into that, and he's always gone about how aesthetics is a slippery slope. So once you remove wrinkles, next it's Botox, and next you're into fillers. And that's really where it's at, and so I recognize that the business model at the Medi Spa is fantastic for that, and so maybe we're a little bit of a gateway to that, but we haven't got heavily into it.
Great, Pavan, do you want to comment?
Yeah, to be respectful of time, I won't repeat much what they're saying. We've been doing bipolar RF for a couple of years now, and RF IPL all comes from dermatology. It's used for facial aesthetics. It was to have that technology to engage and employ our staff to do this. I think it's very important, and it's a good fringe benefit for us. We haven't been marketing the facial aesthetics component yet. It's just been a collateral benefit of our dry eye modality, but we're moving into the full-blown aesthetic space as well.
Great. Yeah, us too. Same thing. Maybe one last question here. Our time's up pretty much, but all of the attendees, thanks for coming. Want to make sure that your questions are answered, so please feel free to write some questions down. But wanted to one best advice tip for those clinicians that want to get into the dry eye space. Wes, we'll start with you.
If you want to get into it, get some diagnostics you can use, like pick your score or your survey that you want to do, pick which osmolarity device you want to use, and some other measurable, and a treatment of whatever way you want to treat it, whether that be iLux, LipiFlow, RF, IPL. But pick that and your consumables, and then commit, because once you do that, you can't just some days talk about it with patients and other days not really talk about it with patients, because then you're not going to feel like it works or that you're getting enough patients to do it. Have the conversation with every one of your patients. Make sure you're getting those scores done on every patient, and fully commit, and you'll see the success happen. But commit.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. Oh, sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead, Pavan.
Yeah, 5 points. Commit, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to have all the fancy tools. You can start a full-on dry practice just with fluorescein, with a validated questionnaire, and the ability to express all your patients, and that's a great way to start. Next, empower staff. Really, whether it's 1 or 2 staff, empower them. Next, like Wes said, invest in some therapeutics and diagnostics. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You can start simple. But in my mind, if you're going to do a therapeutic, like the ones we've talked about, get a diagnostic, get an OCULUS cartograph, get something with myography. Market yourself to your patients, market yourself to other ODs, market yourself to ophthalmology, because they don't want dry eye, we own it, they want us to own it. And market yourself to your GPs in your neighborhood too. And like I said earlier, sell what you recommend what you sell.
Well, that's brilliant. Good. I just want to say it's kind of neat, the topographer aspect of the K5. That's one thing we didn't touch upon, but I've really liked having that, to be honest, just showing people where there's irregular astigmatism or a cone forming, or even with dry eye having a an irregular surface. So I think really maybe potentially undervalued, but by some. But I really like that piece of the K5. So I just wanted to mention that. I wanted to also just let everybody know that Oculus has a summer saving event for refurbished units. The prices start as low as $6,000. So if you're looking to get into something right now, this is a good opportunity. Use your 40K loan and pay it back before you have to pay back the government, make it back. So another good way to do that. You guys seeing my screen okay there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so they have different products as well. The Pentacam and Carte and Easy Field. So reach out to your Oculus rep and get some more information. So we're basically out of time, but I wanted to really thank our esteemed panelists, Dr. Wes McCann, Dr. Peter Laansoo, Dr. Pavan Avinashi. My name's Trevor Miranda, and I wanted to thank you all for your time and your interest. I'll put a little plug in from my perspective. I have a real keen drive to get this dry eye disease out to everybody in the public so that they recognize optometry as treaters of dry eye disease. We've started the Dry Eye Summit to help educate our colleagues and brought speakers from around North America. It'll be a virtual Dry Eye Summit this year in November. We've also started something called mydryeye.ca. It's a network of dry eye practitioners that also has a public-facing site for education. So look for that going forward, where we're helping educate the public. Join us working towards educating the public and understanding dry eye disease and how we as optometrists can really make life-changing differences there. So thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank Oculus, and guys, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you. I hope we can do it again.
Thanks, Trev.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, everyone.
Awesome. Take care, and we'll sign off here.